The sound of the alien fleet's engines was a constant hum in the back of every human mind. They had arrived without warning, a terrifying coalition of technologically superior species that had descended upon Earth with one goal: extinction. The Invaders, an alliance of 5 alien races, each with their own staggering advancements in warfare, seemed to believe humanity was nothing more than a primitive species, easily crushed beneath their boots. From the moment their warships darkened the skies, it was clear that humanity's survival hung by a thread. Cities burned, governments crumbled, and the forces of the Invaders landed with brutal efficiency. For months, Earth's defenses fell in rapid succession. The world watched as their military tried and failed, their strategies outclassed by the Invaders' overwhelming technology. They had underestimated humanity, thinking them incapable of fighting back in a meaningful way. But the humans had something the Invaders never accounted for. One after another, the great nations of the world fell, leaving behind only scattered remnants of resistance. The great cities of New York, London, Tokyo, each turned to ash. The Invaders mocked humanity, sending messages broadcast across the globe, claiming they would eradicate them weak and pathetic species that dared to call Earth home. For most of the planet it seemed like the end had come. Yet, in the ashes of defeat, one final bastion of hope remained. Beneath the ruins of what had once been humanity's military might, a group of scientists, engineers and military leaders had taken refuge. In the shattered remnants of the underground bunker once known as the Earth Defense Command, they worked tirelessly on the only weapon capable of turning the tide, a secret project initiated long before the invasion, one that the Invaders had never discovered. "Is it ready?" General Clara Donovan's voice echoed in the dimly lit command center, her face a grim mask of determination. She had seen her world collapse before her eyes, her soldiers wiped out in days, the cities of her home turned into smoldering ruins. Yet she had not given up. Not yet. The head scientist, Dr. Elias Ford, looked up from the holographic terminal, his face drawn with exhaustion. His once brilliant eyes now reflected the toll the invasion had taken on him. He nodded slowly. "It's ready? But we still don't know how effective it will be. The technology we're using, it's alien, but it's the only chance we have." Clara nodded, her mind racing. The Invaders were brutal, swift, and efficient. They had left humanity with no room for error. If they could not strike back now, the species would be wiped from existence, a mere footnote in the universe's cruel history. "Do we have any chance of reaching them in time?" she asked. "We might," Dr. Ford replied, "but the fleet is already making its way to what remains of the last strongholds. They're on their way to the final battle. If we don't strike before then it's over," Clara finished for him. She turned toward the war table where their final plan was laid out. Their best chance for survival was an untested weapon, a powerful energy-based device designed to disrupt the Invaders' communications and weapon systems. But there was a complication. It needed a precise strike, and it needed to hit the heart of the Invaders' fleet in orbit before they could launch a final ground assault. "The only way we stand a chance," Clara said, her voice low, "is if we send someone directly into their fleet. A single strike. A small, stealthy team. This weapon, it can only be activated by someone inside the heart of their operation. No one else can do it." Dr. Ford hesitated. "You're asking someone to infiltrate their fleet and plant the device? Even if we have the technology to conceal them, getting past their security, it's almost impossible." Clara's gaze hardened. "It's the only way. I'll lead the mission myself." There was a brief silence as the weight of her words settled into the minds of those in the room. Each of them understood the sacrifice. Each of them understood what was at stake. If they failed, humanity's last hope would be snuffed out like a candle in the wind. "Then we have no time to waste," Clara said, her voice carrying a fire that burned brighter than ever before. "Prepare the team. We launch at dawn." As Clara looked around at the faces of the resistance fighters gathered in the command center, she knew that their final stand had begun. They were humanity's last hope. But in this moment, something unexpected stirred in her chest. Hope. Not for herself, but for the future of her species. For the first time since the invasion began, she believed they had a chance. The countdown had begun. The world outside the command center was silent, eerily so. The remnants of cities and civilization were now a quiet graveyard, filled only with the whispers of those who had lost everything. But within the underground complex, a sense of urgency filled the air. The resistance fighters were preparing for their most dangerous mission, and Clara Donovan had never felt the weight of her responsibility more than in this moment. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a blood-red glow across the desolate landscape above, Clara stood before the newly designed stealth ship that would carry her and her team into the heart of the alien fleet. It was smaller than anything Earth had ever conceived, sleek, almost insect-like in shape, and powered by a combination of human ingenuity and repurposed alien technology. The ship's cloaking systems were their best hope for slipping past the invaders' formidable surveillance network. She turned to face her team, Sergeant Mark Harris, a no-nonsense soldier with a reputation for being both tough and resourceful, Lieutenant Rachel Jansen, a former intelligence officer who could read any battlefield, even in the darkest moments, and Dr. Ford's protégé, technician and hacker, Mia Carter. Their faces were determined, but the fear in their eyes couldn't be hidden. They were about to face the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever known, and they had no illusions about the odds. "Remember," Clara began, her voice steady but hard, "this mission is a one-way trip. If we succeed, Earth has a chance. If we fail, well, this is the end of the line. We don't get a second shot. But I believe in every one of you. I've seen what humans are capable of when we have nothing left but each other and the will to survive. That's what we have on our side. Not alien technology. Not advanced weapons." She paused, letting her words sink in. There was no turning back now. Mark, always the first to speak when the tension was thickest, gave her a sharp nod. "We're ready, General. We'll make them regret ever stepping foot on our planet." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "I've studied their movements. We'll be able to slip through their outer defense perimeter with the cloaking device, but once we're inside the fleet, it's a different story. We'll need to move fast." Mia, who had been adjusting the ship's interface, gave a small, nervous smile. "I've got the tech covered. Once we're in, I'll hack their systems and disable their outer layers. The weapon will go off and they'll never see it coming." Clara took one last look at the team. "Let's do this. For Earth." The hatch closed behind them, and the stealth ship's engines hummed to life, sending them rising into the night sky. For a brief moment, the Earth seemed to breathe in sync with their ascent, the crumbled cities below them barely visible in the darkness. The stars beyond were quiet, indifferent to the lives of those below. As they breached Earth's atmosphere and entered the vastness of space, the size of the invaders' fleet became painfully clear. Countless ships, each one a towering symbol of alien dominance, filled the sky. Their massive hulls cast shadows that stretched across entire regions of space. The invaders' forces, so confident in their superiority, never expected a threat from the fragile species they had all but written off. Clara sat silently in her seat, her fingers gripping the armrests, the weight of her role pressing down on her. The target was the enemy flagship, the largest of their warships, stationed at the heart of the invasion fleet. That was where the device needed to be planted. Approaching perimeter, Rachel's voice crackled over the comms, her tone as calm as ever, despite the gravity of the situation. "We're cloaked, but we'll need to navigate carefully. If we trigger their scanners, we're dead." Mia tapped at her console. "I'm in their network. I can scramble their internal systems for a few minutes, but it'll only be enough for one pass. Once we're inside, we need to get the device activated fast." Clara nodded. "We'll get in, plant the device and get out. No distractions. Mark, Rachel, prepare for the ground assault once the device is activated. Mia, stay on their network and make sure they can't track us once we're inside." The stealth ship drifted silently through the invaders' outer defenses, and for the first time, Clara allowed herself to hope. They made it past the first layers of enemy ships, cloaked in the darkness of space, unseen and unheard. But their luck wouldn't last. "Hostile ship detected," Mia said suddenly, her voice tight with tension. "They've detected a blip. Something's wrong with their scans?" Clara's heart skipped a beat. "How long do we have?" "Not long. We're about to be seen. They're locking onto us." Mia's fingers flew across the console, her face pale with concentration. "I'm trying to redirect their scanners, but..." Before she could finish, a massive pulse of energy ripped through the ship's systems. The lights flickered and the hull groaned as the stealth ship was rocked by a near miss. "Brace for impact," Clara shouted, grabbing onto her seat as the ship jolted again. The countdown had begun, there was no going back now. "Shields are holding," Rachel said, her voice strained but steady. "We need to get closer. Just a little more." Clara's hands gripped the controls as she guided the ship toward the heart of the invaders' fleet. Their enemies might have mocked humanity, but they had underestimated them. And now the tables were about to turn. The cloak of invisibility began to flicker as the ship, a small and fragile insect in comparison to the massive, imposing alien vessels surrounding it, edged closer to the center of the enemy fleet. The invaders' warships loomed like towering monoliths, their sleek, angular designs reflecting a cold, calculating efficiency. Clara's mind raced as she fought to keep the ship on course. Every second counted. "How long before we're fully exposed?" she asked, her voice taut, barely above a whisper. Mia's fingers were a blur over the ship's console. "The energy surge we took from that last scan hit our cloaking systems hard. I can keep us under the radar for another 5 minutes, maybe less." Clara nodded. It was now or never. "Mark, Rachel, be ready. We don't know how long we'll have once we land. We need to move fast, plant the device and get out." Mark gripped his rifle tightly, checking his equipment for the 10th time. His face was set, his jaw clenched. "We're going in, General. They'll never see us coming." The ship shuddered again, the invisible barrier protecting it from enemy sensors beginning to unravel as they neared the flagship. The massive warship, with its dark metallic hull and array of weaponry that could obliterate entire fleets in seconds, was now their only focus. They had to plant the device at the ship's core, a location that was guarded by layers of complex defenses. "Once we drop out of cloaking, I'll need at least 3 minutes to disable their internal systems," Mia continued, her voice tight with the pressure of the moment. "If they catch us trying to hack in, they'll lock down everything. You'll be trapped inside their security grid." "Understood," Clara said. "We'll have that 3 minutes or we'll be dead trying." The final approach was harrowing. Their ship came closer to the flagship, its enormity growing with every passing moment. Clara could feel the cold sweat on her brow as she adjusted their trajectory. The enemy ships around them were completely unaware of the small vessel slipping through their defenses, barely the size of a speck in a vast, predatory ocean. The key now was precision. Clara's heart pounded. One wrong move and this could all be over. "Engaging landing sequence," Rachel said, her voice focused but unshaken. They hovered near the underbelly of the flagship, where the ship's shields were weakest. Clara activated the ship's landing gear, locking into a secured position on the massive hull. The rest of the fleet, oblivious to their arrival, continued their slow, methodical approach to Earth's last stronghold. Time was slipping through their fingers, but Clara refused to let fear rule her. "Everyone move out," Clara barked. The hatch hissed open, revealing the cold, metallic surface of the enemy ship's exterior. The 4 of them, clad in black, form-fitting tactical suits, designed to blend with the shadows, stepped onto the hull. They moved quickly, silently, like shadows cast by the dead stars above. Mia's fingers flew over her portable interface, and a small screen flickered to life. "I've got access to their systems. I'm uploading the virus now, just need a few more seconds." The enemy ship's hull was lined with large mechanical ports and vents, some of which pulsed with strange energy. Clara moved toward a hatch that Mia had pointed out, the location of the heart of the flagship's central command. The closer they got, the more intense the alien presence seemed. The walls hummed with an unnatural, almost sentient energy. "Keep your heads down," Rachel whispered, scanning the perimeter. "There are drones patrolling this area. If they spot us, it'll be over." They had to move with deadly precision. Mark led the way, his movements sharp and efficient, his rifle at the ready. Clara's eyes never left the blinking red lights marking the path ahead. They were on a tightrope between survival and annihilation, and one wrong move could tip them into the abyss. As they reached the designated entry point, Mia's voice crackled through their comms. "I'm in. I've isolated the target. The device needs to be planted here at the core. You've got 2 minutes before security systems lock down." Clara approached the control panel, her breath steady despite the chaos pounding in her chest. The sleek alien interface before her was unlike anything she had ever seen, an alien language of symbols and designs that seemed to change before her eyes. But Clara wasn't here to study it. She was here to destroy it. Her fingers flew over the panel, hacking through layers of encrypted locks, bypassing the barriers with a precision that would have stunned even the most advanced human programmers. Behind her, she could feel the weight of Mark and Rachel's presence, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. The timer in her head ticked down. 1 minute. "You've got 60 seconds, Mia called out again. "I'll be able to scramble their systems once the device is in place, but I need a full lock on the core. Just." A loud, mechanical screech echoed through the corridors, followed by a blast of energy that made the ship's hull vibrate under their feet. The ship's internal alarms flared to life. "Too late. They've activated the lockdown," Mia said, her voice rising with panic. "You need to move, now." Clara slammed the device into the designated port, a loud clang reverberating as it locked into place. She straightened up, her mind a blur as the countdown began. 50 seconds. The ship shuddered again. The alarms now screamed in her ear, filling the space with a pulse of sound that set Clara's nerves on edge. Mark's voice came through low and steady. "We've got company. Drones inbound. We're not getting out quietly." "Take them down," Clara ordered without hesitation as she activated the final sequence. As the countdown began in earnest, Clara and her team turned to face the oncoming threat, their weapons drawn. This was it, the final moments where humanity's hope rested on a single, calculated strike. They would either make it out, or they would be lost to history, their sacrifice remembered only as a forgotten echo. The ship's alarms blared relentlessly, their shrill wail a cruel reminder of how close they were to failure. Clara's heart raced, every instinct screaming at her to move faster, but the seconds slipped away, relentless and unforgiving. "Mark, Rachel, take point," Clara barked, her voice cutting through the panic in the air. "Mia, start the final sequence. We don't have much time." Mia, hands shaking but her expression hard with focus, rushed to the small terminal embedded in the wall, her fingers flying across the console. "The virus is working," she muttered, eyes scanning the rapidly flashing symbols. "They've locked the entire sector, but I'm breaking through their final layer now. I just need a little more time." A burst of static interrupted her, followed by the unmistakable sound of a drone's high-pitched whine growing louder. "Incoming!" Mark shouted, his rifle snapping up in a flash. Clara's head snapped toward the hallway just as a series of mechanical drones, a blend of insect-like shapes and sharp edges, suddenly turned the corner, their glowing red sensors focusing directly on their position. They moved with eerie precision, calculating and programmed to eliminate any unauthorized personnel. Without a word, Mark and Rachel opened fire. The drones exploded in quick succession, their energy shields flaring and bursting under the barrage of gunfire. Their mechanical bodies crumpled to the ground, sparks flying in every direction. But more drones were already pouring in behind them, at least a dozen, their sleek bodies racing down the hallway toward the team. The first wave hadn't even been enough to stop them. "Take cover," Rachel shouted as more drones swarmed from the dark corridors, their weapons charging. Clara's pulse spiked. They had no time for a prolonged firefight. The device was almost active but the battle raged around them. She turned to Mia. "Can you override the locks on their internal systems yet? We need them to be blind for just a few more minutes." "I'm trying." Mia gritted out, sweat running down her forehead. Her fingers moved faster than Clara could track. "The system is more complicated than I thought. If I don't get it right, the whole ship will go into lockdown mode. You'll never get out." Clara took a deep breath, forced her pulse to steady and turned to Mark. "How long before the drones breach?" 2 minutes, max," Mark answered grimly, firing once more. Another drone crumpled to the floor. But as its body hit the ground, it triggered a surge of energy from its core, sending a shockwave through the corridor. The blast threw the team back, crashing them against the walls. "Damn it!" Clara yelled as she scrambled to her feet, her ears ringing from the blast. They were outnumbered, outgunned and running out of time. Rachel didn't hesitate. "Cover us." She fired a few more shots into the advancing drones before sprinting toward the nearby control panel, her tactical suit blending with the shadows as she moved. Clara turned back to Mia. "How much longer?" Mia began, but another explosion rocked the ship, and her console blinked out for a split second. "I've almost got it. Just." A pulse of energy surged from a drone, knocking the group off balance. The blast was too strong for even their enhanced armor to completely absorb. Rachel slammed into the floor, groaning as she recovered. "Keep going, Mia," Clara shouted, knowing the mission couldn't afford to be interrupted. She couldn't afford to let anything stop them now. Clara turned to the approaching horde of drones. They were getting closer by the second, and she was beginning to feel the weight of inevitability. Even if they succeeded in getting the device activated, they wouldn't make it out unless Mia could finish the hack. She had to finish the hack. Time ticked down, every second dragging on like an eternity. The pressure was suffocating, but Clara's mind stayed razor-sharp, focusing on one task at a time. Protect the team. Get the device activated. Get the hell out of here. Mia's voice was tight with strain, but it came through. "I'm in. The locks are disabled. You're clear to activate the core." Clara didn't hesitate. She turned back to the central interface, slammed her palm against the glowing alien panel, and began the final sequence. The ship shuddered as the device locked into place within the core. The countdown on the console displayed just 30 seconds remaining. "Move," Clara shouted, turning to face the rest of her team. "We're getting out now?" Mark, Rachel and Mia scrambled to their feet, weapons raised, watching the advancing line of drones. The energy levels from the drones surged, too much for the group to keep up with. Another volley of shots rang out. The team was outnumbered and the ship was beginning to feel like a tomb. "General?" Mark shouted, "We need to move now, or we'll be caught in the blast radius when that device goes off." Clara's stomach twisted. If they couldn't make it back to the ship in time, they would all be caught in the explosion. The device was set to trigger a cascade of energy throughout the flagship, a blast that would destroy the core of the Invaders' entire fleet. It was humanity's last hope, but at what cost? "Fall back," Clara ordered, pushing her team forward, toward the ship they had arrived in. "Get to the ship now." The team sprinted, their breaths coming fast and sharp, every step taking them further from the chaos and closer to salvation. But as they rounded a corner, Clara heard the whine of energy pulses and the screech of metal. A new wave of drones was bearing down on them, relentless and swift. They were running out of time. Literally. 30 seconds. Mia called out from behind them, her voice shaky but resolute. "It's almost time." The sound of the drones behind them grew louder, the footsteps now unmistakable. They could see their ship ahead, its small form nestled against the massive warship they'd infiltrated. Clara pushed her legs to move faster, knowing that every second spent waiting could be the last. And then just as they reached the ship, the countdown echoed in Clara's mind, 10 seconds. With a final burst of speed they leapt into the ship. Clara slammed the hatch shut behind them, locking them inside. The moment the doors closed, the ship shot into the air. Boom. The flagship's core detonated in a massive, world-shaking explosion, the shockwave pulsing outward. Clara's stomach lurched as the shock rippled through the small craft, but they had made it out. They had done it. The warship's destruction sent a wave through the invader fleet. Ships broke apart, the once impenetrable fortress of the flagship now crumbling into stardust. Humanity's final stand had succeeded. But as Clara watched the flagship disappear in the distance, she knew this was only the beginning. Their victory had cost them everything, but it was far from over. The explosion was still echoing in Clara's mind as the ship veered wildly through the debris-filled expanse of the invader fleet. The flagship's demise was a spectacular sight, an inferno that consumed the core of their enemy's command center. For a moment, it seemed as though time itself had paused, no sound, no movement, only the fleeting moments of triumph before the reality of their situation hit. The shockwave from the detonation had shaken their ship violently. It was still intact, but the hull was rattling from the strain. Clara gritted her teeth, gripping the controls tightly as the ship veered between splintering fragments of alien warships. "We're clear for now," Rachel said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "But the fleet isn't going to stay disoriented for long. We need to move fast." Clara's breath was still coming in short bursts, her heart hammering in her chest. It had worked. The device had detonated precisely as planned, ripping through the alien fleet's heart. The shock of losing their flagship would scatter the invaders temporarily. But as Rachel had said, it wouldn't last long. The enemy had been far too prepared to crumble with one blow. Mark's voice cut through the tension. "Do you think they'll retaliate right away? We've stirred up a hornet's nest." Clara thought for a moment. The destruction of the flagship would buy them time, maybe even a few hours, perhaps a day, but the fleet still had countless warships and drones, all capable of reorganization and launching a counterattack. "We need to get back to Earth," she said firmly. "The longer we stay in this system, the more likely they are to track us. Mia, I need you to initiate the cloaking sequence now. We'll run dark, no more signs of life on our ship. If they find us, it'll be a miracle if we make it back." Mia, pale and tense, was already working her console, fingers flying. "The cloaking system is online. I've rerouted power to our engines, trying to mask our signature as much as possible. But we can't stay invisible forever. Once we leave their fleet, we'll be exposed again. We'll have to outrun them." Clara nodded grimly. "Then we'll have to outrun them." The ship surged forward into the blackness of space, leaving the remains of the invaders' flagship far behind. The cloak held firm, making them a silent, invisible speck in the grand, empty cosmos. Every movement they made had to be calculated with precision, the chance of detection growing as they approached the edge of the enemy's fleet. Mark stood watch, eyes scanning the star-streaked horizon. "If they catch us, we'll be sitting ducks. Do we have any backup forces? Any kind of reinforcement from Earth?" Clara's eyes hardened. "The rest of humanity's resistance is fighting for survival on the ground. We're alone out here." Mia's voice wavered as she continued working. "I'm sending a distress signal back to Earth, but it'll take time for them to decipher it. The enemy may already have access to our frequencies. If they're smart, they'll try to trace us." Rachel crossed her arms, leaning against the console. "How far do you think we can go before they figure out we're gone?" Clara turned back to her team, her eyes sharp. "We'll need to make it past their sensor grid. If we can slip through, we can re-enter the outer edges of Earth's system without them noticing. But that's a big if. The odds are stacked against us, but we've made it this far. I'm not ready to give up now." The ship continued its steady, silent flight. Clara's mind raced through every possible scenario. The invaders had mocked humanity as an insignificant species, too weak to fight back, too fractured to organize. But now they had seen firsthand what humans were capable of defiance, of resilience, of sacrifice. And they would never forget it. The final stand was just the beginning. Clara had no illusions about what awaited them. Even if they made it back to Earth, the war wasn't over. It was only starting to get worse. Suddenly Mia gasped, her voice thin with panic. "I'm picking up a trace. A signal, small, too small for their fleet to notice, but it's there." Clara's heart skipped. "What kind of signal?" Mia worked frantically at her console, her face tense with focus. "It's coming from Earth, or at least close to Earth's orbit. It's faint, likely another cloaked ship, probably one of our own. If we can reach them, they can help us get back." Clara's fingers gripped the armrest of her seat, her mind working rapidly. "If that's true, they might be tracking the signal already. Can we get close without them detecting us?" Mia's eyes flickered over the screen. "We'll have to risk it. It's our best shot at getting help." Without hesitation, Clara gave the order. "Do it. Set course for the signal. Full stealth mode. We're not taking any chances." The ship adjusted course, cutting through the vast emptiness of space. As they neared Earth's orbit, Clara's mind raced with thoughts of what would happen next. The destruction of the flagship was a blow, but it was a single blow. The alien invaders were methodical and relentless. Their next move would be devastating. And they had to be ready. The faint hum of the ship's engines was the only sound as they slowly approached the source of the signal. Earth was visible now, a blue and green orb suspended in the vastness of space. But it felt more distant than ever before, as if they were still light years away from the world they had fought so desperately to protect. Mia's fingers hovered over the control panel. "We're within range. Preparing to transmit a response signal." The ship's sensors flared briefly as they scanned for any hostile presence. The tension was unbearable. Clara's throat tightened with the weight of the moment. If this was a trap, if the invaders had anticipated this move, they would be walking right into the lion's den. But there was no turning back. They had come too far. "Signal incoming," Mia said, her voice suddenly soft. "It's coming from a ship. A human ship. They're responding." Clara leaned forward, her heart pounding in her chest as the image on the screen cleared. A small, battered vessel appeared, a familiar design. One of Earth's last remaining warships. "General Donovan," a voice crackled through the comms, "this is Captain Aiden Carter of the Phoenix. We've been waiting for you. Welcome home." Clara exhaled in relief. It was them, Earth's last hope. But her relief was short-lived. There was a war still to be fought, and this was only the beginning of humanity's resistance. "Prepare for docking," Clara said, her voice steady. "We've got a lot of work to do." As the ships prepared to join forces, Clara couldn't help but wonder if the invaders had truly underestimated humanity, or if this was the start of a much darker conflict. One thing was certain, humanity would never be the same again. The Phoenix loomed ahead, a battered but determined vessel floating against the backdrop of the black void. Its once glossy hull was now streaked with scorch marks and battle damage. But to Clara, it looked like a beacon of hope, a reminder that humanity's fight was far from over. As her ship drew closer, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking right into a trap. "Status?" Clara asked, her gaze still fixed on the Phoenix. Mia had been silent for a while, her fingers moving rapidly over the console. "It's damaged, but it's functional. I'm receiving a coded message from their command. It's confirmed, Captain Carter is on board and their fleet is in bad shape." "How bad?" Clara pressed, her voice cold. "Bad enough that they're trying to regroup. We're one of the last ships to make it out of the war zone. They've lost communication with several of their outposts. If the invaders strike now, Earth could be defenseless," Mia said, her voice trembling slightly. Clara took a deep breath. "We're not done yet." As they docked with the Phoenix, the hatch hissed open, and the unmistakable sound of boots echoed through the airlock. Captain Aiden Carter was waiting for them, flanked by two of his officers. His grizzled face bore the weight of exhaustion, but his eyes were sharp, as if every moment in this war had sharpened his resolve. "General Donovan," Carter greeted her, offering a firm handshake. "Glad you made it out. We've got a lot to discuss, but we don't have much time." "Time is something we don't have to waste," Clara replied, her voice steady. "I take it your forces are in disarray?" Carter nodded grimly. "We've lost contact with several of our allies. We've been holding out in this sector, hoping for reinforcements. But if what you've told us is true, the invaders are regrouping faster than we anticipated. They're already adapting to our tactics. We need a new plan, and we need it now." Clara glanced over at Mark and Rachel. "Let's get to the war room. We need to be ready for whatever comes next." The Phoenix's war room was small but functional, walls lined with maps of Earth's solar system and projected holograms of the alien fleet. The room was quiet, save for the hum of the ship's systems and the soft murmur of the crew working tirelessly at their stations. Clara stood at the center of the room, her gaze fixed on the hologram of the enemy fleet. Even in disarray, the invaders had an overwhelming numerical advantage. Their ships were massive, and their speed had already proven deadly. But Clara wasn't about to back down. "We've seen their tactics," Clara began, her voice commanding attention. "They rely on overwhelming force and precision strikes. But they also have a weakness: disorganization. They're a scattered force, with command structures still trying to regroup after the flagship's destruction. That's our window." Rachel leaned forward, tapping the table. "We can exploit their fractured fleet by attacking their weak points, disrupt their communications and their supply lines. Without that, they'll fall apart." Captain Carter nodded. "But we need to do it before they reassemble. If they figure out our strategy, they'll counter it within hours. Our best shot is a series of fast, brutal strikes. Hit them where it hurts, then get out." Mia added from her station, her voice focused. "I've been analyzing their fleet patterns. They have an exposed supply depot in the outer rings of the asteroid belt. It's poorly guarded, and we've got the perfect opportunity to strike. But it'll be risky. Once we hit, we'll need to get out fast. They'll send everything they've got after us." Clara's mind raced. They didn't have much to work with. The Phoenix's fleet was in tatters, and most of their weapons were low on power after the constant bombardment. But the supply depot could be a game-changer. Cutting off the enemy's resources would cripple their ability to fight back. "We do it," Clara said, her tone resolute. "We hit that supply depot. Hard." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. "We've already lost too much to sit back and wait for them to finish what they started. It's time to make them bleed." Hours later, the Phoenix and the remaining ships of Earth's dwindling fleet were positioned just outside the asteroid belt. The supply depot loomed in the distance, a fortress of steel and alien technology, surrounded by a perimeter of heavy fighters. Clara could feel the tension building. Every ship in this sector was counting on this one mission. If they failed, Earth's defenses would crumble. They couldn't afford failure. "Status?" Clara asked, her eyes narrowed at the approaching depot. "Shields are holding steady," Mia reported from the command console. "The depot hasn't noticed us yet, but we'll be in their sensor range in less than 5 minutes. Deploy the drones," Clara ordered. "We need to neutralize their fighters first. Once we're in, we hit their supply core directly. No distractions." Rachel checked her equipment and met Clara's gaze. "We'll be right behind you." "Good," Clara said, then turned to Carter. "Are your people ready?" The captain nodded. "We're good to go. Our fighters are prepped and waiting for your signal. Then let's make this quick. Prepare to engage in 3, 2, 1. The ship surged forward, breaking the silence of the void as it powered toward the supply depot. The fighters launched first, their engines roaring as they peeled off, streaking toward the enemy defenses. Clara's heart raced as the Phoenix and its ragtag fleet dove in behind them, weaving through asteroid debris. The first volley of shots lit up the sky as the Earth fighters clashed with the depot's defensive drones. Laser fire streaked through the dark, and explosions illuminated the cold expanse. Clara watched, every second feeling like an eternity as the two forces collided. "We're in," Mark shouted over the comms. "Cores exposed and we're moving in." Clara's pulse quickened. This was it. This strike would either break the invaders' supply line or send them spiraling into retaliation. "Hit them hard, hit them fast," she said through gritted teeth. "No mercy." The Phoenix shuddered as the weapons fired, the hull groaning under the pressure. The supply depot's core glowed with an alien light, now exposed and vulnerable. Clara watched as their missiles streaked toward their target, the countdown to impact ticking down. The depot would either fall, or the battle would become an even deadlier fight for survival. She stood firm, knowing that this was their only chance. "Fire?" The missiles streaked toward the exposed core of the alien supply depot, their paths glowing bright against the cold, starless black. Clara held her breath as the countdown seemed to stretch out forever. Every muscle in her body was taut with anticipation. This was humanity's best chance to disrupt the invaders' operations and give Earth's forces a fighting chance. Failure was not an option. Impact in 5, Mia's voice crackled over the comms, her voice betraying none of the stress Clara could feel radiating through her own body. The core is vulnerable. If we hit it directly, we'll cripple their entire supply line. Clara's grip on the armrest tightened, her fingers going white. She could hear the deafening rush of adrenaline pounding in her chest. The Phoenix rumbled as their fighters took evasive maneuvers around the depot's last line of defense. Ready, Clara murmured to herself, eyes fixed on the holographic map. 3, 1. The explosion was beyond anything Clara could have prepared for. The depot's core erupted into a ball of violent, blinding light. The shockwaves slammed into their ships with a force that rattled them to their very core. The Phoenix jerked violently to the side, the ship's hull groaning as if it were about to buckle under the strain. Hold on. Captain Carter barked, holding onto the console as the Phoenix lurched again. But the devastation didn't stop there. The ripple effect from the explosion spread out like a web, sending shockwaves through the surrounding asteroid field. Asteroids, some larger than the Phoenix itself, began to tear through the remnants of the depot's defensive perimeter, shattering like fragile glass under the intense pressure. The battle raged on as the enemy fighters, now crippled or disoriented by the sudden blast, tried to regain control. The Earth fleet moved in fast, weaving between the debris, capitalizing on the confusion. But there was a catch. They're regrouping. Rachel shouted over the comms. The invaders are pulling in reinforcements. We've only got a few minutes before they launch a counteroffensive. We need to get out, now. Clara's mind raced. The explosion had been a success. The depot was obliterated, its supply lines severed, but it had come at a cost. The invaders were already reconfiguring their forces, quickly preparing for retaliation. We're not done yet. Clara snapped. Push forward. We can't afford to retreat. We've opened a hole in their defenses and we have to widen it while we can. Understood, General, Mark replied, determination evident in his voice. We'll clear the path for the others. The next few moments were chaos. The Earth fighters swarmed the remaining invader ships, their weapons blazing as they sliced through the confusion. The Phoenix and its companions remained in the heart of the battle, launching quick strikes to finish off the remaining defenders. The cost, however, was evident. The Phoenix was taking hits from every direction. Energy blasts scorched its shields, the hull creaking under the strain. We're not going to last much longer at this rate, Carter said, his voice tense. Our weapons are starting to overheat. We can't keep up with this kind of pressure for long. Fall back. Clara barked. Regroup at the outer edge of the asteroid field. We've done enough damage here. Let's get out before we're overwhelmed. The remaining Earth ships began to pull back, their fighters covering them as they fell back toward the edges of the asteroid belt. But Clara couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were being herded. The invaders were smarter than they appeared. As they approached the edge of the field, Mia's voice rang out sharply. They've launched another fleet, bigger than before. There's no way we can outrun them on full throttle. Clara's eyes widened in realization. It's a trap. The moment the words left her mouth, the asteroid field erupted with a new wave of energy blasts. More warships, larger than anything the Earth fleet had encountered before, barreled through the debris, their weapons primed and ready. The invaders had been waiting for them to regroup, ready to trap them in the depths of the field. We've got no way out. Rachel shouted. We're surrounded. Clara gritted her teeth, desperately trying to think through their options. The battle was turning against them faster than they could react. The Phoenix was one of the last remaining ships with any firepower left, and the rest of the fleet was too scattered to mount a coordinated defense. We need a distraction, Clara said quickly. Something big enough to get us out of here. Mark's voice cut through the comms. I've got an idea. Before Clara could respond, Mark's ship veered sharply toward a nearby asteroid cluster. I'll pull them away from you. You get the rest of the fleet out. No time to waste. Mark, no? Clara shouted, panic rising in her throat. That's too dangerous. Mark's laugh crackled through the comms, but it was tight with the understanding of what he was about to do. Someone's got to keep the heat off you. I'll be fine. Just get them home. Clara's heart twisted, but she didn't have time to argue. Mark, don't. But he was already gone. The final transmission cut off as Mark's ship dove toward the heart of the enemy formation. His ship, smaller and faster than the invaders' warships, darted between asteroids, drawing fire as he did his best to divert their attention. In that moment, Clara knew he was sacrificing himself. He was creating a diversion long enough for the Phoenix and the rest of the fleet to escape. "Mark!" Rachel yelled, her voice strained, but it was too late. The rest of the fleet sped toward the opening Mark had created, but Clara's heart was heavy with the knowledge of what they had lost. They had succeeded in striking a blow against the invaders, but at a terrible cost. And now, as they fled into the depths of space, Clara knew that Earth's survival was still uncertain. The fight was far from over. As the Phoenix and its remaining allies jumped into hyperspace, Clara looked out the viewport, the stars streaking by. The debris of the supply depot and the remnants of the battle still lingered in the distance. They had gained a small victory, but the cost was already mounting. And with every second, the invaders were regrouping, preparing for the next move in this brutal war. The stakes had never been higher, and humanity's final stand was far from finished. "Get ready for the next phase," Clara whispered to herself, her voice tinged with both sorrow and determination. "The real fight is just beginning." The stars blurred into streaks of light as the Phoenix and the remaining human fleet sped through hyperspace, escaping the brutal battle they just survived. The victory, though hard-earned, had come at an unimaginable cost. Mark was gone, his sacrifice a jagged wound in the heart of the crew. Clara could still hear his voice in her mind, urging them to survive, to keep fighting, even as he dove into the jaws of death to save them. But there was no time for mourning. The war was far from over. The invaders were out there, regrouping, adapting. Every move they made brought them closer to Earth's final downfall. Yet, Clara knew that the human spirit could never be crushed, not while there was breath in their lungs. "We're clear of their pursuit," Mia's voice broke through Clara's thoughts, though it carried an edge of anxiety. "But I'm picking up something strange on our sensors. A ripple in the hyperspace matrix. They're tracking us." "How?" Clara asked, her voice tight with concern. "I don't know," Mia replied, her tone sharp. "But it's not natural. They're somehow following us, bending space itself. They figured out how to detect us in hyperspace. We won't be safe for long." Clara's mind raced. The invaders had already adapted to humanity's tactics faster than they'd ever anticipated. If they could track the fleet through hyperspace, they were one step closer to wiping them out entirely. But there had to be a way to fight back. There always was. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Clara ordered. "And lock onto any nearby anomalies. If they can bend space, so can we." Rachel looked up, her eyes gleaming with the same grim determination that had kept her going through every battle. "Are we really going to try to outmaneuver them? We don't have the firepower to take them on directly." "We don't need firepower," Clara said, her voice low but full of resolve. "We need to outsmart them. I've been thinking, what if we can create a false signal, something that'll send them chasing in the wrong direction?" Mia's eyes lit up with understanding. "A decoy. But we'll need to create a false trail they can't detect through hyperspace. A signal that'll make them think we're somewhere we're not." "Exactly," Clara said. "We'll use their tracking method against them. If they're focusing on us, we can bait them into a trap. But we'll need every ship we have left to play the part. It's all or nothing." Captain Carter, his face etched with the weariness of too many battles, stepped forward. "If we're doing this, we'll need to commit fully. We'll need a flawless distraction, and we'll need to keep them off our scent long enough for the fleet to reach Earth." Clara nodded. "We'll do this together. Earth's survival depends on our ability to break their pursuit." The plan was set in motion quickly. Mia worked feverishly at the controls, rerouting the ship's energy to create a series of false signals that would lead the invaders into a false corner of space. Meanwhile, Carter's remaining fighters were sent on high-speed maneuvers to draw attention and keep the enemy fleet distracted long enough for the Phoenix and its allies to slip into a parallel hyperspace lane, far from the invaders' tracking method. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Clara stood at the command station, her hands gripping the railing, watching the holographic map of their flight path. The tension was unbearable. The Phoenix was the last hope of humanity's resistance, and every decision Clara made would determine whether their people would survive or fall to the invaders' might. "Decoy sequence online," Mia said, her voice steady despite the gravity of their situation. "Sending out false readings now." Clara exhaled. "Get ready. Once they bite, we'll shift to hyperspace and leave them in our dust." Moments stretched into eternity as the ship's systems hummed and pulsed with energy. Then, just as Clara's resolve began to waver, the alarms blared. "They've detected the signal," Mia said sharply. "They're diverting. They've taken the bait." "Now?" Clara commanded. The Phoenix and its remaining ships jumped into a new hyperspace lane, bypassing the invader fleet and slipping away into the black void of space. The fleet had barely escaped, but Clara knew the invaders would be onto them soon. They didn't have much time. "This isn't over," Rachel said quietly, her voice full of the shared exhaustion that had settled into the crew's bones. "We've bought some time, but they'll adapt. They always do." Clara's eyes hardened as she glanced at Earth in the distance, a bright blue dot in the vast emptiness of space. They were close, but so were the invaders. "No matter what," Clara said with iron conviction, "we will protect Earth. They'll have to burn through every last ounce of our will before they take this planet." As they neared Earth's outer orbit, the crew worked tirelessly, preparing for the inevitable counterattack. They knew the invaders wouldn't let them rest for long. Every ship, every fighter would need to be ready for what was to come. "Status?" Clara asked, her voice calm but tinged with urgency. "We're almost there," Mia replied. "But I'm detecting multiple warships emerging from hyperspace in Earth's orbit. We won't have much time." Clara's chest tightened. "Can we hold them off?" "We're outnumbered, but we'll fight to the last," Carter said, his voice steady but worn. "The Earth fleet has been preparing for this, but we need a coordinated strike to push them back." Clara didn't hesitate. "Then we'll make our stand here. We'll give Earth the time it needs." The Phoenix and the remaining fleet launched into battle one last time, their weapons blazing. The invaders had arrived in full force, their enormous warships surrounding Earth like a pack of wolves closing in on their prey. But humanity's last defense was ready to fight. Clara gave one final order as the battle unfolded. "Give them hell." The clash of weapons echoed through the black void of space, brighter than the stars themselves. Human and alien forces collided in a fury of light and destruction. Every ship, every fighter engaged in one last desperate battle to secure the future of Earth. The Phoenix fought bravely, its guns roaring as it tore through the alien vessels, fighting not for survival but for victory. The crew held their ground, knowing that every moment they bought Earth brought humanity one step closer to triumph. In the midst of the chaos, Clara stood firm, watching the battle unfold before her. The invaders had underestimated humanity, and they were paying the price for it. But Clara knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a fight for Earth. This was a fight for the very soul of humanity. And no matter what, they would never give up. The final stand had become humanity's greatest weapon, because no force, no matter how powerful, could ever truly break the spirit of mankind. And when the dust settled, when the last shot had been fired, Earth remained free. And humanity, battered but unbroken, would rise again.